Hello and welcome to Moments of Truth on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. Yesterday's news was dominated by the inglorious return to frontline politics of Dodgy Dave Cameron. It was somewhat staggering, but somehow not surprising, that Rishi Sunak couldn't find anyone out of his 350 elected MPs who are competent enough to be Foreign Secretary. Now that the dust has settled, it might be worth theorising why, of all people, that ham-faced hamburglar Cameron was plucked from the political wilderness to take on this particular great office of state. Some have suggested that it would possibly have made more sense to put David Cameron into the role of Home Secretary instead of shifting James Cleverly from the Foreign Office to the Home Office, much to the reporter's chagrin of Cleverly, who apparently quite liked flying first class around the world on the taxpayer's proverbial dime. This might make a bit more sense as the role of the Home Secretary has become something of a poisoned chalice over the last decade or so of Tory misrule, famous for promising things like getting net immigration down to 100,000 people per year, stopping the boats, deporting innocent women and children to Rwanda, things that they have no hope of actually achieving. Given that job to someone who doesn't have to worry about being re-elected, makes sense, as they'll be free to run around and accomplish exactly nothing and never have to worry about the consequences. So why was David Austerity Brexit Greensill Cameron put in the Foreign Office instead? Well, a friend of Labour Social got in touch this morning with her theory, which fits perfectly with what I've been saying for months about Rishi Sunak not calling a general election until they have rushed through a terrible post-Brexit trade deal with India. The rumour is that Cameron has been brought in by Sunak, had his ego massaged and his pockets lined with cash for one reason and one reason alone: to secure this deal with India. Why? Because once that deal is in place, the estimated £720 million worth of shares owned by Sunak and his wife in Infosys, the second biggest IT company in India, will massively increase in value. Maybe Cameron was offered a percentage of that increase, a tidy payday for a man who has sat in his shed bored shitless for the last 7 years. You think the Tories are corrupt? You ain't seen nothing yet. Cameron is not an MP. He doesn't have to worry about placating voters or constituents. He doesn't have to face the same amount of scrutiny concerning his income as elected parliamentarians. He can't face a withdrawal petition, and he can't be questioned face-to-face by his opposite number, David Lammy, in the House of Commons. So, if you wanted to rush through a dodgy trade deal, Dodgy Dave is your man. He can act entirely in the interests of Rishi Sunak's personal fortune, and there's nothing that you or I can do about it. A personal fortune that looks set to grow massively as a direct result of an India-UK trade deal. And who was the first foreign dignitary Dodgy Dave met with in his new role as Foreign Secretary? Even before he had sat down in cabinet, and a representative of the EU, maybe, the US, Ukraine, Israel. No, he met with Mr. Jai Shankar, his Indian counterpart. You better believe it. This whole get richer quick scheme would be entirely on brand for Sunak. After all, the main reason he wanted to be Prime Minister in the first place was to enrich himself and his family. Just 2 months before Sunak opened hundreds of new licenses for oil and gas extraction in the North Sea, Infosys signed a $1.5 billion trade deal with energy giant BP. And why did Sunak join forces with every racist in the land to vote for Brexit? Because there's no way that the EU will go for the kind of trade deal that Rishi Sunak's father-in-law and co-founder of Infosys would want. A trade deal that would be absolutely skewed towards benefiting big Indian companies above all else. A trade deal that allows the products of sweatshops to be sold tax-free across Europe. A deal that fails to protect the rights of workers in India as well as industry and manufacturing here and in the EU. A trade deal that does nothing for Scotch whisky but massively facilitates visas for Indian workers wanting to come here. And why did Braverman really have to leave? I doubt it was the fact that she breached ministerial code time and time again and tried her best to incite a riot last weekend. For this hideous incarnation of the Tory party, that's just Monday. I think it's more to do with the fact that she is scared shitless of the prospect of tens of thousands more people who look like her entering the country. She made that very clear last year when she almost derailed trade talks with India by claiming that the largest group of people who overstay their visas are Indian migrants, or, as I like to call them, expats. Don't forget, this trade deal doesn't have to be particularly good for the UK or the UK economy. Tories clearly don't care about things like that. Immigration was clearly the big sticking point. And now, with Braverman out the way and Cameron operating as a henchman for Sunak's share portfolio, we will almost certainly see a rushed and horribly lopsided UK-India trade deal before the end of this parliament. A deal which will categorically fail to protect British industry, fail to protect British businesses, and fail to protect British jobs. Furthermore, there is absolutely no reason the far-right Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, would feel compelled to add protections for Indian workers to the treaty. So Brexit Britain will be free to make slave-made commodities that fail to meet even basic European standards. Something that could have never happened while we were a member of the EU. It could be argued that this was always Sunak's plan. If it works, his family shares will be worth over £1 billion, more money than most of us could ever conceive having to ourselves. And I'll bet he takes those shares with him as he flies to America, his forever home, on his private jet after a half-arsed election campaign, but before Sunderland has even finished the count. Rishi Sunak has no intention of winning the next election for the Conservative Party. Neither does David Cameron. You ask me, this whole thing is for one reason and one reason alone: money. Just like Brexit, the wealthy get wealthier, and the rest of us, struggling to keep our heads above water, are left to clean up their mess. Remember to like, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below.